very good afternoon to all of you. The topic which has been allotted to me is District Election Management Plan. Just to introduce myself, I am Ajeet Kumar, 2002 batch IAS, Collector and DM Shardol. As we have heard from the earlier speakers, they have told you about the communication plan, and some of them have also told you about the law and order. I would just like to tell you that at the district level, it is the DEO who is the nodal officer and who has to do all this planning. That's why this time the Election Commission through a circular told all the DEOs that they will have to prepare a district election plan. So just to appreciate as to why do we need a district election plan at the district level, just to cover some of the important points, I would just like to tell you that proper and timely preparation of the district election management plan, it helps the administration to manage the elections effectively, and that too in a planned manner, and it also helps us to know all the election related process in a proper order and a proper manner. Then it's also a complete district election profile from the beginning of the election process till the end of the elections. That means till the counting process, as well as sending reports to the CEO and from the CEO to the Election Commission. And I would also like to tell you that it's a very useful handbook for the observers, because mostly the observers come few days before the conduct of elections, the election process starts, so it's very handy for them. And then it's a very convenient handbook for the DEO himself, the SP, the RO and the other election related officials. So I would just like to cover some of the salient features of the district election plan. I would be using the word DEP or DEMP for short. The first thing that we cover in the plan is the basic information related to the district. Then there will be elector details and polling station details. Then a very important thing, sector movement plan. Then as we have heard from the morning itself, communication plan is a very important plan for the district. Then there will be vulnerability mapping, as one of the speakers covered. Then police deployment plan based on that. Then training of polling personnel and their welfare, this is equally important. Then there should be a proper plan for distribution, reception and counting, and then poll day arrangements and plan for counting day. And last but not the least, we also have to take care of media, we have to take care of standing committee meetings, then complaint monitoring becomes very important, and then we have a new concept of micro observers. So we need to take care of them also. Now the first thing, district at a glance. The most important features which we have to cover in this, like the map of the district should be there, and then the map of all the ACs, like we had in this plan. We started like this, so we had a map of the district, then we had map of all the ACs. We had 3 ACs in our district called Shardol in MP, so we had the maps of all the 3 ACs. So this is a very good way of presenting the informations. Then telephone directory of all the officers of the district as well as those of Election Commission. Then some basic information like geography of the district, which includes general information. Then demography plays a very important role, that tells us about the administrative structure of the district, then population, male female ratio, literacy, and some of the other important things like general law and order situation, history of the district and its constituencies, and the past electoral offences. Elector details. Some of the most important elector details which Election Commission is very particular about these days is gender ratio. Then there is something called elector population ratio, age cohort, then inclusion and deletions in the current electoral roll, and also the informations relating to photo coverage as well as the epic coverage. And there are prescribed formats for these, and these formats run from 1A to 5D. So these things, these information should be contained in the district election plan, so that the officers of the district level as well as the observer can appreciate these informations and can also make better planning for them. information related to polling stations. Right from the morning we are hearing about vulnerable polling stations, critical polling stations. So it should contain the basic information, say the total number of polling stations, then it should also contain constituency wise information of polling stations and vulnerable and critical polling stations. Then the first and the most important thing which any DO will do the moment elections are announced or even before that, basically we appoint OICs, we list down all the activities, that these activities are very important, and for these activities we shall have OICs from the district level officers. So some of the points which I have identified are like polling personnel, electoral roll, postal ballots, EDC, ballot papers. You have an OIC for law and order also, generally it is the SP. Then polling personnel welfare, it is a new concept which the Election Commission has introduced very recently. Vulnerability mapping, then there will be standing committee meetings, and then facilitation centers which will be there. OIC for complaint monitoring, daily monitoring of certain aspects, then election expenses. For observers also you should have licensing officers, then you will be having micro observers, you should have one OIC for them also. Then you have to manage your distribution center, counting center, police personnel, polling stations also equally important. Then you have one OIC for transportation arrangements also, who also helps you in the route chart preparation and sector movement plan. Then there should be one OIC for training separately. Then of course you will have OICs for communication plan, for enforcing model code of conduct, sector officers, EVM, media center or cell, videography arrangements you have to make for critical events. Then for procurement of election materials, even issuing I-cards these days are very important, so you should have one resource person for that. And then there are certain aspects like computerization or randomization of EVMs, polling personnel, reception center and the counting staff. So basically by listing down these, I am just trying to say that when we prepare a plan we should have OICs for all these activities. It may be possible that the DO himself is the OIC for some of these activities, or the SP is the OIC for some of these activities, but we should have a clear cut laid down policy that yes, he is the person who is looking after this. Polling personnel, as you all know, we create a database for all of them from the state government as well as central government employees, and we also classify them into P0, P1, P2 and P3 through randomization process. Providing training to all these polling personnel is equally important. About EVMs, I have covered certain aspects like we should have a proper facility for their storage, then there should be first level checking by the engineers, then there is randomization of EVMs, and then these EVMs are also prepared. Its sealing and keeping them intact under tight security is equally important. So these are also some of the important aspects. And as all of us know, the moment elections are declared, model code of conduct comes into automatic enforcement, so we have to enforce it. So these days the Election Commission has provided us with all the circulars, but most of us don't read these circulars. So I have just listed out some of those things which are very important, about which there are circulars and which we must read for enforcing model code of conduct, like prevention of defacement of property, restriction on printing of pamphlets, posters. There are circulars relating to tours of ministers, restrictions on presence of political functionaries after the campaign period is over, complaint monitoring system concerning violations of model code of conduct, then restrictions on public meetings by ministers or political functionaries in educational institutes, misuse of government vehicles, government buildings, government officials. Then there are also important circulars relating to use of loudspeaker for election campaign, deletion of references of politicians or ministers on the official website, permission for use of vehicles by the DO or RO or other officers who are appointed OICs for this, restrictions on use of convoy of vehicles, as one of the speakers was mentioning that there can be only 3 vehicles in the convoy. Also there are important circulars related to use of helicopters during elections, advertisement of on radio and TV, standing committee meetings also. Then enforcement squads should be formed for both urban as well as rural areas, and videography of all important events. So there are important circulars of the ECI which are there, but most of us do not read it, but fortunately this time the Election Commission is preparing a proper checklist in which all these circulars will be covered and compiled at one place. Sector officers play a very important role, so we should have database creation for them, we should appoint them and we should also train them. Then there are 2 visits of the sector officers, and after that there is a proper feedback. We take their feedback, and based on that, if there are certain things where we have to make necessary arrangements for the polling stations, we make those arrangements. Then in our communication plan there is a proper provision for rehearsals. As Mr. Mathur told you, at least 2 rehearsals are very important, and these sector officers are a part of this communication plan. Then we also make a sector movement plan, and the sector movement plan will be basically for the movement of all the polling parties 1 day or 2 days in advance as per the Election Commission's guidelines. Then there should be plan for movement of sector officers, police personnel, sector magistrates, and also a separate movement plan for micro observers. And based on the route charts which we prepare, we should also assess the vehicle requirement. So sector movement plan is very important, and we should have a separate movement plan for police officers as well as for our sector magistrates. We should hold a meeting with the mobile service providers like BSNL, Airtel, Idea, or any other private provider for that matter, and basically we should map all the polling stations and all the areas of our district, and we should map the shadow regions, shadow areas, and we should have provision for wireless sets for those areas. And as it has been told, there is a 3-tier communication level at the district level, one at the DO office level, other at the RO office level, and the third is the polling station booth level. Vulnerability mapping and critical booths, I think it has been covered in the presentation related to law and order. I would just like to say that there is a ECI circular in this regard, and we have to identify the vulnerable hamlets and wards and identify the persons who make it vulnerable, and we should try to round them under various provisions of the CRPC and other sections of the IPC. And then classification of booths into critical, highly critical and non-critical. One thing which I would just like to mention is the worry list of candidates is very important, because during our standing committee meetings we take feedback from our candidates that okay, you tell us, do you think that there is any threat from any other person or any person for that matter, and if he says that yes, this is a person from whom we feel threatened, or he is the person who may be working for a political party, he is the officer or a lower government functionary who may be involved in some of these activities meant for certain specific political parties, we would like to take their views. So worry list of candidates is very important while doing this exercise. Police deployment plan, of course Mr. Akash Tripathi has covered it, but I would just like to say that the assessment of the requirement of police personnel is very important, and as rightly pointed out by him, we shall always have a less number of police force, but at our district level we have provision for SF, special armed force. Then we should also take into account home guards, forest department officials, excise department officials, and we should also have provision for special police officers whom we empower through issuing certain orders as DM. Then we should also make use of the availability of central paramilitary forces, and deployment of police personnel should be done by the SP and the DM, of course in consultation with the observer. That is very important. And while preparing this police deployment plan, we take into account vulnerability mapping and criticality of the booths. It has to be kept in mind, and there should be a separate route chart for movement of police personnel. So these are some of the things which are important and which should be taken into account. Then training of polling personnel is a equally important issue. We should basically divide it into 2 parts. One is training of EVMs and the others are non-EVM issues. Of course there should be proper selection for venue for training, and the emphasis should be more on hands on training rather than the classroom lecture mode which used to be earlier, and there should be postal ballot facilitation centers at the training centers for the benefit of polling staff. And since we are talking about polling personnel welfare, so election commission is very much concerned about certain facilities at the training center which should be ensured for the welfare of the polling staff, provision of proper drinking water, first aid, medical facilities, toilet facilities, and the other thing was non EVM training. There should be facilitation center at training venue for postal ballot paper and EDC. Then they should be told about their duties, and they should also be made aware about tender and challenge voting and certain other aspects, and we should also get them acquainted with all compulsory declarations which have to be made by the presiding officer at different times, and they should also be told that they cannot go near the voting compartment and assist the voters normally in normal cases. And the basic idea I am trying to cover through these slides is there should be proper training of polling personnel and proper OIC should be identified, and there should be provision of their facilitation centers for their welfare. Standing committee meetings, these meetings are very important, and in fact the election commission has pointed out that there are certain points of time when we should have compulsory meetings, like at the time of draft publication of the rolls. In fact, we are saying that these days we should publish these draft rolls ceremoniously in the presence of political parties and their important functionaries. Then standing committee meeting should be held before the final publication of the rolls, during preparation of the lists of polling stations, and in general after the declaration of elections they should be organized at frequent intervals during conduct of elections. And we should be using these meetings not as mere formalities, but for providing information to the political parties about the various poll schedules, and we should also elicit their support. We should take their support in maintaining law and order, because many times these political parties and their functionaries also help us, and they also help us in proper enforcement of the model code of conduct. So during these meetings we should tell them. Polling personnel welfare, this is a very important issue which the election commission is focusing these days upon. In fact, it has issued a circular also, and there should be a proper appointment of a nodal officer at the district level to coordinate and supervise polling personnel welfare measures. Then as told earlier, we should provide basic amenities at training, distribution, reception and boarding venue like drinking water, toilets, help desk, health care, and the senior officer should also be there to supervise the transport facilities for polling staff, polling personnel. Then we should also track the movement of the polling personnel for their safe arrival to the polling station and their safe return to the reception center after the elections are over. Then we should provide all these facilities. Then there is also provision for making ex gratia or compensation payment in case of any injury or death caused to any of our polling personnel. We should also issue identity card to all of them, and we should take special care, because in Delhi there was a case that one of the physically challenged person was also made part of the polling parties. So we should take special care while classifying women and physically handicapped persons and persons with mental ability, and as far as possible we should not utilize them unless and until the situation so warrants that we have to make use of them. Another important issue which is very important, which I would like to cover, is media. All of us know that media plays a very important role these days in elections, and during our communication plan presentation also we discussed that we should make use of media, and in this regard the election commission has also issued a circular which says that we should establish a media cell at the DU office, and we should also appoint one officer which is generally PRO in our headquarters at the district level as the nodal officer to interact with media persons. and we can also invite them during the standing committee meetings so that they can also cover it. But even otherwise we should hold meeting with media persons 4 to 5 times during elections, at least I am saying. We can have more meetings. We should also allow them, in fact we shall have to allow them for coverage of nomination paper filing. Then we should also keep them briefed about the time schedule of various election related activities, and then we should encourage them to report cases of violations of model code of conduct which may be done by government officers or staff or candidates or political parties. Many times through newspaper cuttings only, as DO or as RO, we come to know that okay, such and such thing happened, such and such model code of conduct violation happened in one of our parts of our district. So we should encourage them, but we should also make sure that there is no false reporting. And then we should also share important informations like list of polling stations, candidates contesting the elections, route chart, transport arrangements, etc. Then these days we have to allow the media persons also for coverage on the poll day, but there are certain restrictions for them. So we should keep in mind those restrictions, and these days we also have to allow the media persons on the day of counting, about which the Election Commission has issued certain circulars. We should keep them in mind. Complaint monitoring, as some of the speakers have told in the morning, that there is a provision for complaint monitoring these days, and in fact complaints are monitored on daily basis during elections these days, and even after elections in some of the states complaints are being monitored. So there should be a proper appointment of a nodal officer in the DO office, and there should also be an appointment of an inquiry officer AC wise, for conducting inquiry into these cases of violations of model code of conduct, and the action taken report should be communicated to the CO office immediately by the DO, and there will be daily reporting of these complaints. Complaint redressal is very important, so we should take this thing very seriously. Use of videography and digital cameras during elections, this is also an important topic. The DO has to ensure that the videography of all critical events have to be covered. I have given some of the examples of these critical events like violent incidents, booth capturing, then during nominations, on the day of polling, if there are certain events, these should also be covered. So through these examples I have just tried to highlight that videography should be conducted for all the critical events. Then expenditure, as we all know, expenditure of the candidates is monitored from the date of filing of nomination, and the registers of the candidates should be inspected every 3 to 4 days. And these days one more thing has come, that is dummy candidates. Dummy candidates have to be tracked. These days what happens is that some of the political parties candidates, they have some candidates whose expenditure limits some of the political parties candidates use. So these candidates who stand as independent candidates, they are used as dummy candidates. So we should track them during elections, and the rate charts for items of common use should be finalized during elections. So expenditure is a very important element these days. Micro observers, as we know, this time we had micro observers for some of the critical polling stations. So micro observers should be appointed from the pool of central government or PSUs staff which are present in the district, or if it is not present in the district, then in the commissionerate, the commissioner should make facility for those districts where central government personnel are not available. We should provide proper training to these micro observers, and there should be a nodal officers for micro observers at the DO office. There should be separate route charts and transportation arrangement for taking these micro observers to the polling stations where we are appointing them. Then we should also integrate these micro observers with the communication plan, because generally we send them to critical or highly critical booths. So, they should be a part of the communication plan, and before these micro observers are sent to these critical or highly critical polling stations, the observer should brief them if possible, and the diaries of the micro observers are scrutinized by the observers at the reception center after the elections are over. So, this is also important, for which we should make arrangements. Distribution centers and dispatch of polling parties. As we all know that all the polling parties are dispatched from the distribution or dispatch center. So, we should have proper facilities at the distribution center, and there should be arrangements for separate arrangements for distribution of EVMs, and before these polling parties arrive, the sector officers should brief them before their departure from the distribution centers, and the sector officers should also inform the polling parties about their bus numbers which they will be boarding as a part of the polling personnel welfare, and we should also track the movement of these polling parties, that they have safely reached their polling stations where they had to conduct the elections. OK report has to be given by all the sector officers in this regard. Then, as we all know, once the elections are conducted, all the polling parties come back at the reception center. So, in continuation with the policy of the election commission that there should be proper facilities at the reception center, there should be all these facilities like proper lighting, proper barricading of reception counters, control room should be set up. There should be other facilities like drinking water, toilets, food plaza, I will say, strong rooms for EVMs and other election related materials, and medical team. Then there should also be provision for proper security or the presence of police personnel. Then at the reception center these days we should have a facility for scrutiny of form 17A and PO diary and other relevant documents in the presence of observers. This is also mandatory after the elections. Then other facilities like telephone, fax, internet, computer section for data feeding, separate room for observers, DOs, ROs also. Then for tracking the movements of untoward events during the day on the poll day, and for tracking the movement of these events after the elections are over at the reception center, we should have a separate special counter set up for receiving EVMs and other documents from the specific polling stations about which complaints had been received from political parties or candidates during the course of polling. So, polling stations in which significant events such as violent incidents or heated arguments with the polling personnel, clash between polling agents or breakdown of EVMs were reported. So, at the end of the day there should be separate counters for receiving such EVMs, and they should be thoroughly checked. The PO diary and other documents should be thoroughly checked. So, this facility should also be there. And after all, the counting is the most important event of the elections. So, at the counting center, first of all the counting center should be selected by the DO and it should be vetted by the observer, and only after the observer vets it that we get the approval of the commission. So, selection of the counting center is very important, its venue. Then we should have the facilities like we talked at earlier places. Other facilities like telephone, fax we have already told, proper security and presence of polling personnel, earmarking of rooms for particular ACs, and then arrangement of tables as per the commission's guidelines in the rooms, arrangement for counting agents, arrangement for food packets for counting staff and other officers on duty. Media center should also be established, as I told that there should be a separate media cell. Then separate arrangement for counting of postal ballots, we have to make separate arrangements for them. Display of result of each round of counting on notice board, announcement of result of each round of counting by the returning officer, and there should be provision for sealing of EVMs and other election related materials. Poll day arrangements, as two of the speakers have earlier covered it, basically I have tried to cover it under three heads. One is at the polling station level, the second is what the sector officers have to do, and the third is what we have to do at the district or AC level as DO, as RO. At the polling station, mock poll should be conducted in the presence of polling agents, and its reporting as well as certification by the PO that mock poll has been conducted, it is very important. Then sending periodical reports about the poll percentage, reporting any untoward incident, it is equally important, and reporting any electoral offences committed or cases of adjournment of poll. So, these are the some of the things which are very important at the polling station level. The sector officers have also certain duties. They have to visit all the polling stations and they have to collect the mock poll certificates from the POs. They have to report about the commencement of poll at all polling stations. They also have to report the cases of defective EVMs or making immediate arrangements in case of such polling stations where the EVMs become defective, periodical reporting, poll percentage and other things, then also reporting about close of poll and the safety of these polling personnel and their safe return, that they have come back to the reception center. At the district level or at the AC level, as DO, as RO, we have to ensure that our communication plan which we have made with such planning, that has to be activated. Then we should also be in close contact with the police control room. In spite of this communication plan which we have, we should have the responsibility of maintaining law and order for the whole day, replacement of defective EVMs as quickly as possible, periodical reporting to the CEO, then making arrangements for complaint handling because a lot of complaints come this day, then making arrangements for escorting of the polled EVMs back to the reception center. Counting of votes, we have already covered that there are certain arrangements which have to be made at the counting center. At the end of the day, counting of votes is done, so we should make proper arrangements for these and for arrangement of display of results of round wise counting and declaration of the result at the counting center. Then I would just like to mention that as DO, as RO, we send 70 to 80 reports to the CEO. In fact, in the checklist which has been prepared for the DOs or the ROs, all these things have been covered as to what reports or informations have to be sent to the CEO office, but I have just tried to cover some of them, that some of the reports or informations related to nomination, polling personnel, counting center, mock poll certificate, poll percentage on poll day, counting day information such as results in formats 21C, D, E and other informations even after the elections are over, like index card, form 20, RO diary, RO report, checklist, check memo, etc. So, through this presentation I have just like to tell you that as DO, the district is the basic unit where all these plans are made and executed. So, as DO, first we should identify all these activities and we should have proper plans for all these things, and only then we can execute it. So, this is what has to be done at the district level, and we had made a very good plan at our district level in Shardol, and the election commission had also appreciated it, but I think the presentation becomes monotonous because most of the things have to be prepared in a book form. I do not know whether it became monotonous for you, but this is how we have to make it. Thank you.
I have got a few doubts. This SPOs, that is police officers who are designated special police officers.
Yes, sir.
Is it only the retired police personnel or other categories
No,
of people also?
even class 4 employees, sir. Even kotwas, even class 4 employees, sir, are peons. We also empower them if we require their
But do
services.
they have that training or background, or
In fact, we call them 1 or 2 days in advance, sir, and it is the SP who provides them training.
micro observers training?
Yes,
Was
sir.
it handled by the observers, or did you also train the micro observers? They
In
might be
fact,
bank staff and others, central
yes, sir,
government
it was
employees.
mostly central government employees, bank officials, LIC officials. In fact, it depends upon the observer also, sir. Like one of our observers out of 3, he took a lot of interest. So he used to be present in all the training sessions.
No, but who handled the training? Your own?
Ultimately, DO, sir.
DO.
The instructions at the state level were that the DO has to handle the training of the micro observers, but there was many instances where some districts had very few micro observers, and in others there was a situation of plenty. So the divisional commissioners were then empowered that they would organize these trainings along with the DO and make necessary arrangements. But when the observers arrived, because basically the micro observers had to report to them, so they also then held another training once the micro observers were deputed to a particular district.
I was also told that where there was a deficit of micro observers, you had mobilized, or movement was done by the divisional commissioner or the COs.
Yes, sir.
Other doubt is in regard to 17A register.
Yes.
Did all the officials presiding or the polling officer 3, did they fill it, polling officer 2 I think, did they fill it up properly? Or did you find, did you have instances where they did not bother to fill it up properly?
Sir, it depended mostly upon the presiding officers as to how much interest they took. But in general, the quality was not so good, sir. I mean, we have to improve upon this, sir. But mostly in those cases from where we had certain reports of untoward incident, we took more interest in scrutinizing those diaries, sir. Or election commission has also issued certain guidelines that if the polling percentage is very high, so based upon those criteria, sir, we went for that.
The other doubt is about the counting centers. You mentioned that vetting by observers. What happens really is that proposals have to be formulated and sent sufficiently in advance to the commission even before the observers arrive. So did you wait till the observers, or was it that the proposals got approved where observers had reservations and revised proposals were formulated for approval of the commission for the counting centers?
So generally we send it in advance, we get it approved by the commissioner, but the moment the observer arrives, he inspects it. So in case he has some reservations, then he may ask us to revise the proposal, but mostly yes.